For the past 10 years, the state has been helping communities make the most of their cultural assets, especially for economic growth. The designation of cultural districts opens the way to direct support from the state and other forms of help, such as tax credits. To tell us about one of the two most recent designations for Little Saigon in Dorchester are the board president with Boston Little Saigon, Annie Lay, and the executive director of the Mass Cultural Council, Michael Bobbitt. I'd like to thank you both for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having us.
I want to start with Annie Lay, and maybe for viewers who aren't familiar already, you can give us an introduction to the part of Dorchester for which this district has been designated, the Little Saigon District. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, thank you so much. So it's the Fields Corner, part of the Fields Corner area, really aligned Dorchester Ave between down Park Street to Adams Street, a little triangle there, up to Lion Street, where the Gin supermarket is. And we really want to capture a second supermarket. There is there's two supermarkets there, AC Farm and Foodland Market. We want to capture a second market because that one's a little larger and it has a little more variety than the other smaller markets in the area. But it's, all the things that's been in the district has been happening already in pre-existing before the cultural district came in. And so we were like, this is a great opportunity to bring everyone together, to bring more awareness, just as a destination spot for tourists to visit, because for folks that don't live in the Fields Corner area, they still travel to the Fields Corner to get their Vietnamese groceries on the weekend or to try out the different restaurants and different events. And so we were like, well, let's try a cultural district to try to enhance that with everyone in the state as well.
Annie, on the surface, anybody driving on Dorchester Avenue can see all this investment by Vietnamese Americans into these businesses. But even behind that, I remember being told even almost 20 years ago that when Vietnamese Americans moved somewhere else, they left Dorchester, they still would come back here and spend time and spend money.
Yes, and that's where food and ingredients are like the hardest things to get, and especially during holidays when you're looking for those things to celebrate the Th celebration, and that's where you have to go to the markets there. So even as a child, I grew up in California, but even as a child, I had to drive to an hour and a half each direction to go visit the Vietnamese markets with my parents, and that's what I remember doing every weekend. And so the same thing here in Massachusetts, where, and even folks live in New Hampshire and Maine travel to Dorchester to buy their needs that may not be available to them locally.
Michael, what Andy described, a lot of things have happened, as it were, spontaneously already. So why have a designation?
So the wonderful thing, well, Annie put it in a great way. There's nothing like food and culture that brings the communities together. But so this was signed into law by Governor Patrick in July of 2010, and the Cultural District program started in 2011. There are 51 in the whole state and 4 in Boston alone, with Little Saigon being the latest addition to it. But there are many benefits to having a cultural district. One, it attracts artists and cultural enterprises. It encourages businesses and job development. It establishes tourism destination. It can preserve and reuse historic buildings and enhance property values, and then really foster a strong sense of pride for a community. What we do know is when people absorb culture, when they come to an area, they park, they drive, they eat, they dress up, and they gather together. And so there's so many reasons why this is a good benefit for so many communities.
Michael, one thing about culture, especially when it becomes sort of italicized, is it's almost like catnip for gentrification. But can these designations in a way help protect districts from gentrification as well?
Well, and that's some of the reason why they're there, so that we're protecting the historic building, the content, the diversity of the people there, and the food and the art there. So in many ways, I mean, we do want investments to happen. I'd love to see the cultural districts all doing cultural street fairs and markets and swap meets and all kinds of things like that. But the hope is that we're maintaining the history and the reason for developing the district in the district.
Annie, I'm sure you've heard the stories in print or otherwise about gentrification around Fields Corner now, and that does affect a lot of Vietnamese Americans, maybe as renters in housing, but also in businesses. How do you see this designation helping with that?
Well, especially since COVID, we've reshifted our priorities to make sure that we support the businesses as well, because it's more about displacement for me, and we just want to make sure that the business owners are prepared and ready because some of the small businesses still don't have any digital footprint. And so when COVID happened, like you couldn't even order online, you didn't even know the business existed. And so we're hoping that the cultural district can help those businesses just increase their marketing, increase the digital presence so that they can, like, just be doing well as a business so that as things change, they will be ready for it as well. We just don't want to see what happened in Chinatown where as the rents go up, their business is still not meeting the economic expectations. And so that they can't also increase and meet the revenue doesn't meet the demands of the rent. So they would have to close. And so, it happens everywhere. We just want to make sure our business owners are prepared and ready and can stay where they are versus closing and moving.
Michael, there are a lot of places where there are some of these same ingredients, maybe with differences of culture, but what made this bid for designation strong enough to be approved?
The culture there, the Vietnamese people, and the food and the art and the area that Annie Lee and the advisors and all the key stakeholders picked out. It's fantastic. And it's so great to have Annie Lee leading this. I know in other parts of the state, these cultural districts are managed by chambers of commerces or business improvement district groups, some nonprofits, but it's great to have Annie Lee leading the work there.
Andy, another thing that struck me about this district, if you've gone to eat in some places, and I'm thinking it could be Blarney Stone, it could be one of the Vietnamese restaurants. When you walk in, you don't see all Irish in one place and all Vietnamese in another. I mean, you see Dorchester diversity. Talk about the importance of supporting that with this designation.
I love the diversity of it, and it's great because I can go into pretty much anywhere, and I can get pretty much anything in Fields Corner these days. And even when I go into different business, like when I do go to the Barney Stone, sometimes there's people speak Vietnamese, and I'm like, wait, what's going on? So I love that, and it's a nice place for friends just to come together, and no one feels excluded, because things do come together. And even if you go to Cocoa Leaf on a random day, there's a mix of people in there. And that's what I love about Fields Corner. There's just so many different cultures represented in that.
Michael, what about some of the other forms of help that come with designation? I mean, starting with the council itself, but maybe even things like tax credits. What could that mean?
It could mean attracting more businesses to the area, bumping up property values. It certainly could mean, as the designation grows and such. Again, I mentioned before that people go to areas to absorb culture and they spend money in those areas. So there's more economic benefit for all the businesses there. I do want to say personally, my first time to Fields Corner was Christmas 2 years ago. I adopted a baby from Vietnam when he was 8 months old. He's now 20. And when he came to visit, my first time going over there was to go have a meal with him at one of the restaurants. I can't remember the name of the restaurants. I can see it when I drive by it, but I just loved it. And now I actually go to a gym and drive through that area 4 times a week. It's just a beautiful place.
And I also want to ask you about getting support from this, from the community, because on the one hand, it seems almost like it ought to be a cinch, but on the other hand, it must have made people think a different way about what they wanted for their community. What was that experience like for you?
So I think part of it is, so before we had started this whole cultural designation piece, I think the Vietnamese community was very siloed into what they did. They just focused on their culture and events, they did their thing and just didn't really interact with everyone else. And so when the cultural district talk began, we tried to bring everyone together for the conversation. And we had tons of conversation with different neighbors. The name was a hard part because Fields Corner is a very diverse neighborhood. And so to have a cultural designation that's Vietnamese focused was hard on people. But we had multiple conversations, and we finally decided the name and moved on with it. But we're also looking forward to helping other cultural districts within the Dorchester area achieve the same. So we're helping one another. And I got a lot of support from the High Square Task Force when they did the Latin quarters. I can do this work. And so I'm going to pass on that resource as well.
Well, I'd like to thank you both very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Chris.
And that was Annie Lay from Boston Little Saigon and Michael Bobbitt from the Mass Cultural Council. We'll have more news in just a moment.